Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Robin, and you're listening to Bowel Moments,
the podcast sharing real talk about the realities of IBD. Served on the rocks. This week, we talked to Will Awve, and we discussed being diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in college. We talked to him about trying every medication approved for inflammatory bowel disease and eventually needing J-pouch surgery. We talked to him about C. diff and his bouts with that. And finally, we discuss outdoor adventures with IBD. Cheers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bowel Moments. This is Robin.
Hey, guys, this is Alicia, and we are stoked today to be joined by Will Awve. Will, welcome to the show. We are so excited to hear your story. But first question is always, what are you drinking?
Yeah, so might be on the boring side compared to other folks, but I didn't have a lot of time today after work. So I'm actually just drinking some green tea. It's getting nice and cool outside here in Wisconsin. Fall's right around the corner, so green tea seemed like the right thing to drink today.
Yeah, that is a good. I am beginning to feel like an alcoholic, Robin, because
quite frankly, yes.
Our last several guests have been drinking like water, tea, and we're like, I'm drinking bourbon, so
yeah. It's fine.
It's fine. Robin, what are you drinking?
I have something so fun today.
Ooh.
A frozen pina colada.
Oh, I love a frozen pina colada. It's like, well, and you live on the beach too. So you've got the perfect combination over there.
Yes. I was feeling very beachy. I went and walked on the beach first thing in the morning yesterday to watch the sunrise. And so I've been feeling very tropical.
Nice. I love that you're also up early enough to see the sunrise. It never happens at my house. So, although Will being up north, this is happening more and more. So actually today I did kind of catch a little bit of it because it's just getting dark here very fast.
Yeah, so. It's just about that time of year where you wake up and it's dark and you get home from work and it's dark. So got to take advantage of it when it's light out.
Exactly.
What are you drinking, Alicia?
I am drinking a fig whiskey cider smash. So it is whiskey with some apple cider because again, it's fall, and some orange zest and some orange juice and a little bit of sparkling water. It's really good. Although there's also obviously fig in it, and that's a little chunky. So it's a little bit dangerous as well.
So don't drink it through a straw, maybe?
I am drinking it through a straw, which I don't know. I don't know if that's helping or not. I may switch tactics here in a minute, but it's very tasty and it feels very fall. So I think it's lovely. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited to hear your story. Would you mind telling us your IBD story? How are you connected to our community?
Yeah, I'll back up a couple of years. So currently, I'll give you a snapshot of where I am now, and then I'll go back to where this all began. So I'm 23 years old right now, and I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis back in 2015. So I was a sophomore in high school at the time. And I think my story started out very similar to a lot of other folks that I've heard talk about theirs, where, just kind of, these weird symptoms that we know today are like flare-up symptoms of UC. But at the time, when you go to your local, pediatrician, they're just not quite sure like how to tackle it. It's anything from, it's a stomach bug to, maybe they're constipated, and they kind of put you through this whole like checklist, right, of things that it could be. And it just never quite did the trick. And so in the meantime, while this is all being figured out, of course, I'm dealing with this stuff in high school and class and kind of trying to navigate that, trying to figure out like what's going on like with my body and like why I'm just not working correctly, especially at, a young age. But eventually, I think it was an MRI is what I actually had that kind of solidified this, diagnosis that, hey, like you have ulcerative colitis and it's this chronic condition. You're going to have it for the rest of your life. And that was hard to hear for me. I mean, I just wasn't, until that point, I really hadn't had any major health issues. I was healthy. I did sports and I was involved and just took care of myself. So to hear that I kind of had this condition that no one quite knows, why it happens or what causes it, and now I have it for the rest of my life, it's kind of like, well, what the hell? That kind of sucks. And luckily, I was able to kind of control that first flare up with just the typical some steroids to get you started, and then I was just on oral medication, and that was sufficient to get me through high school. And luckily, I never really had any big flare ups, and I kind of thought that I had this disease tackled. And I thought, while there's horror stories out there, but it's just not going to be me. It's not going to be my story. And, these 2 pills are going to basically take me through the rest of my entire life, and I'm never going to think about it. And that just wasn't the case. By the time senior year came around in high school, I think I had my first bout with C. diff. So I got lucky enough to get C. diff, which was like a flare up, but on steroids. I mean, it was really like intense all the time. And truthfully, I remember being really scared about like telling my family that, hey, like my symptoms are really bad and the things that I normally do to control them just aren't working. And I certainly didn't tell my GI doctor at the time because I just, for some reason in the back of my mind, I knew it was going to be like bad news because I'd gone years without issues. And then all of a sudden, like, boom, this hits me out of nowhere. But eventually it just got to the point where where I had to go in, or I had to like leave a message for my GI doctor to let her know that like, hey, I'm not doing okay. Like my symptoms are off the charts right now. I'm running to the bathroom 15 to 20 times a day. I'm in school. Like, how do I navigate that? I'm leaving tests, and there's all sorts of like anxiety and stress that we all know comes from that, when you're just never sure if you're going to be able to sit through a class, or at the time I had a job at the local grocery store, so just going to a work shift and having to run back and forth, and so that was really tough to go in and basically admit that, hey, like I'm just not doing super well with this. Luckily, that was able to be controlled with just like your typical antibiotics, right? I mean, the first time you get C. diff, it's pretty easy to control it, but I know my doctor was telling me that she was like super concerned that I kind of let it go on as long as I did, and there was conversations about like, well, have you permanently damaged like some tissue? Like, do you have scar tissue now from the inflammation that you caused yourself by not coming in? And so I think that was like the first time that I really realized that like this condition is something that I can't like fight or ignore. It's something I'm going to have to just kind of like read my body and understand like when I'm not doing so hot. And if that's the case, I need to reach out for help. And so that was obviously a big step in everybody's journey, is just kind of accepting the fact that, there's help out there, and you're going to have to make like tough decisions, even if it, you have to admit to yourself that you don't have as good of control over it as you might think or that you want. So from there, I went from high school to college, and I studied at UW-Madison. So I grew up in Milwaukee, hour and a half drive to Madison. That's where I settled down for my undergraduate degree. And that was great. I mean, it was a great experience. When I got there, I lived in the dorms. My condition was kind of back under control a little bit. I got heavily involved with like school activities and classes, and I was a member of our marching band at UW, which is a really important experience to me. And if you've never seen or heard of like the UW-Madison marching band, we do a lot of cool stuff. And the group it's a really intense group, physically speaking. I think anytime you're out on the field marching and playing, it's intense, but this particular band still has this very old traditional marching style that's very physically intensive. And so I was happy to be able to do that. And I had energy at the time, and my condition was under control enough where I could go out and do this with this group. And so that was really great. But I did have another bout of C. diff towards the end of my freshman year that kind of like, it was like very like relentless. And I kind of had to step back from like a couple things. It was tough with school, didn't get a lot of good sleep. And obviously like that cycle kind of continues to the point where it's like, it's not sustainable. And so that was kind of when I started going back onto steroids like prednisone and the antibiotics. And I kind of was just not in control of the situation at all anymore. And I was also transitioning to my, adult GI doctor, and that was over at Freighter. And the first thing she said to me when I sat down with her is that the oral medication that I had taken for years, that I was super comfortable with, the medication that I had very, minimal side effects with, was not going to do the trick like any longer. And that was when it was basically recommended that I start doing infusion treatment. And that was, at the time, that was like surgery was never on my mind at this point, but infusion medication was like super scary to me. I mean, anything with like a needle or an IV. I mean, I'm the same guy that almost passed out like the first time I ever had to get blood work. And I remember they were trying to like force feed me apple juice, and I was like just passing out and cold and like sweating all over the place. And like they were trying to like hold me down. I was like, okay, this is just not for me. So when she suggested that I get these infusion medications, I was like, is there any other way? Like, seriously, this is too much for me right now. And of course there wasn't. So I think I started on, oh God, it's hard to remember because you know what? I did all of them. But I think I started on Entyvio, which was nice because I've heard that for a lot of folks, it's hard to get Entyvio bad. Like normally people start on Remicade or, some of the other more traditional ones that have been around a little bit longer. But I started on Entyvio and actually had a really pleasant experience with all the infusion treatments. I mean, the staff was always super nice, and it was kind of like a comforting thing. So that turned out not to be like as scary as I thought it would be. Usually I would just like bring a book or study some homework, or maybe even just like listen to music or a podcast during my infusion treatment. And it was always, it was never a big deal, and it helped me get back to my life. So that's always kind of like the silver lining of this stuff, right? Like you go through hell, but then you kind of get back to the things that make it all worth it. Definitely a reoccurring theme in my journey, I think. So yeah, I started on Entyvio, and throughout college, it was just kind of this back and forth, like flare up after flare up. And, this infusion treatment isn't going to work anymore. So let's move on to the next one. Let's go through insurance. I just got so familiar with this whole process because it happened over and over. And, by the time I got to like my senior year, I had been through all of them, and I mean, I don't know. I still really enjoyed my college experience, but I mean, I never, like towards the end, I never went out. And of course there's COVID reasons too, why I didn't go out. But, at the end of a long day, I had so little energy energy. We all know how it goes. Like sometimes when you're going through a flare up, it's like it's scary to eat. It's scary to give yourself nutrients because you know it has to go out the other end, and you just don't want to deal with that when you've got classes and places to be. Like I can't tell you how many times there were close calls, like getting out of a lecture and trying to like get back to my apartment so that I didn't have to like use a public bathroom for the 100th time that day. And those experiences are just starting to add up. I mean, it seemed like it was happening all the time. And it was tough with marching band. I mean, one of the things that we do in marching band all the time is we travel, right? We travel to perform to different places. We follow the football team. We go perform at our own events. And, towards the end of my college career, we were taking planes out to LA or to New York. And so sitting on a plane and traveling with a big group where you don't always have a chance to take time to go use the bathroom, and you're also dealing with a bunch of kids that have no idea what ulcerative colitis is or IBD at all. And so how do you explain to these folks that like, hey, I know I just used the bathroom 6 times, but like I need to go again, or like I don't want to go out for pizza because it's gonna kill me. And like I just a lot of like kind of awkward experiences that I kind of had to handle alone during all those times of travel. And so I'd say that my college experience was kind of littered with this. Like I was there, right? I enjoyed it. I did the things that college kids do, and I went to class and I hung out with friends and I was social, but it was never without this like condition just like looming over my shoulder. Like there was always something in the back of my mind, like maybe I shouldn't go out and drink alcohol because that's a no-brainer, or maybe I'm just scared to go do something that's just so natural for other people. So I finally got through college, and it was tough. And kind of right as I graduated, like the summer between when I graduated in May and October, things got like really bad, like really quick. And I couldn't necessarily tell you why, but I was on my last leg of medications. I'd been through all the infusion treatments. I was even taking some of the more recently like FDA approved like oral treatments, like I think it was Xeljanz or Zeposia. Yeah, I mean, all of them, Stelara, Remicade. I mean, I can't even remember all the different things that they just kind of put into my body. And on top of that, I was on prednisone for so long that I couldn't even tell you, like, I didn't even remember what it felt like to be off of such a strong steroid. I mean, I was on like the highest dose that they would allow me to go on for like long extended periods of time. And like, I couldn't even, people talk about the side effects of prednisone. I don't even know what they were like because I just got so used to them. That was my normal. Yeah. So things got bad and I had nowhere to turn to. I think that my GI doctor kind of knew, like, she was very familiar with my situation, and it was hard for her to look me in the eye and say, hey, I've seen this before. Like, I kind of know what happens after this point, and I could have told you years ago that when you started not responding to medications, that there was probably only one thing that you could do. And I always would turn it down in a conversation. If she would even mention surgery, I was just like, hey, like, I'll figure it out. I'll power through it. Don't worry about it. Like, I appreciate looking out for me, but I'm not doing surgery. Like, I'm 21 or 2 at the time. Like, I'll get through it. I'm just stressed out, and that's why I'm flaring up so bad, as if it hadn't been going on for 4 years. Yeah, well, that summer it kind of hit me that there was no way that I could keep going on and do the things that I want to do and live my life with this condition or with a diseased colon at all. I couldn't be on prednisone anymore. It was just so bad. I mean, I was on it for just months at a time. Wasn't getting any sleep. I wasn't eating. And on top of it all, I had just started a full-time job. I'd be in the bathroom so many times a day, walking from my desk to the bathroom, to my desk to the bathroom. I was getting nothing done. I mean, seriously, it was a terrible feeling because I just was so anxious. And yeah, I wasn't eating. I think when I went to the doctor a couple months after I graduated, I was down like 35 pounds from what they considered to be like a healthy weight. And I mean, I was like skin and bones. Like I look back at like pictures of myself, and it was gradual for me, so I didn't quite see it. But like my friends and my family were just like Will, like, look at you. Like I was just a shell of myself, honestly. And I never went out. I'd get home from work and I would just lay on the couch, and like that's where I stayed until the next morning, and just never too lazy to not lazy, exhausted, too exhausted to get up and even like make myself a decent dinner. And there was even kind of a funny phase in there where I thought that I was going to solve all of my UC problems by like cooking certain food or drinking like filtered water or something, like, and maybe for some, gurus that's okay, but it just wasn't, it obviously just didn't work. Getting a Brita filter was not going to change my condition, but I thought it might. I was desperate, so don't judge. But that's where I was at. And I think it was actually, what's funny is that we're doing this podcast here on October 4th. And it's actually this day last year that I told my boss of my brand new job out of school that Like I had made a decision to go get this surgery and I was going to take off of work. Like I was just going to be on leave and that was it. And I'd called my doctor up and I said, hey, you're right. I have to do this. And she kind of had everything ready to go for me. She knew it was coming. She was like, yep, I kind of already let them know. Like they're expecting a call from you. Like go get your consultation with the surgeon, get it scheduled. Like I'll pull for you. I'll try to get this done as fast as possible so you don't have to live with this anymore. And I was so like exhausted and beat down from all this stuff that like, yeah, it was scary to think about surgery and it was scary to think about like what my future would be like with so much like uncertainty. You read so many horror stories online and it's a terrible place to go. Like going online before the surgery is one of the worst things you can do because all you hear about are people's horror stories about what went wrong or, hey, 30 years ago I did this. And yeah, believe it or not, things change in 30 years. Like it's not the same thing. But I was scared, but I was also so like, I mean, what I was doing with my life, it wasn't living. So like, what do I have to lose at this point? I couldn't work, couldn't see my friends, couldn't even eat, couldn't do anything fun, just felt like crap all the time. So it had to happen. And so it was like this day last year that I sat down with my boss and I remember I was all choked up because this guy kind of gave me a really good opportunity out of school. And of course, that's like what college is all about, right? You go and enjoy it and you get out of school and you start working to pay off your debt. And so I was all excited to have like my own apartment and have this job and I was a professional now and all this stuff. But yeah, I basically had to tell him that, hey, like I can't function. I need a couple weeks off to collect myself and prep for this, big surgery. And honestly, it was like the best conversation. He was like so absolutely supportive. And that is so important for people out there that are dealing with this, whether it's work or school or any commitment, anything, a relationship even, like it is so important to remember that people like will support you. I was so anxious going into the conversation, right? I mean, I was like shaking. I was like, oh my God, like I have to tell this guy that I'm going on leave and that I'm not going to be able to work and all these projects that he has me doing. I'm gonna have to like push them off to someone else or just not do them. And like, those were the things I was worrying about, not my health. And that's just so backwards. Like you always have to prioritize your health and know that the people in your life that care about you and support you, they're not going to blink an eye when you make these kinds of decisions. I mean, the first thing he said to me was like, he's like, you take as much time as you need and we will support you. He's like, let's worry about your financial situation and how we're going to support you through this so that, you don't have to worry about paying rent and, things like that. And it was just super, I just wasn't expecting that. I was expecting kind of well, hey, that's unfortunate. Good luck. But it was so much more than that. And I thought that was, it kind of just reaffirmed that I was doing the right thing and I was making the right decision. And if this boss that I just met a couple months ago could support me, then just about everybody else in my life that cares about me is probably going to be able to support me 10 times more. So yeah, I had about a month where I just kind of sat at home and, kind of collected myself and was thinking about, what I was going to do for work post surgery. I was very much geared into thinking, okay, now that this is going to happen, how am I going to get back to my life afterward? I was, of course, reading up on all this stuff and trying to familiarize myself with what was actually going to happen during the surgery and like what life was going to be like with a temporary ileostomy. And that was like so bizarre. I almost didn't want to look because I was just kind of like, geez, I guess I'll find out eventually, right? Like, do I really have to bombard myself with all this anticipation and stuff like that? But that whole month leading up to my surgery, which was scheduled for early November, was a lot of just trying to like get comfortable with like what was actually going to happen. And I don't actually think I ever did get that like comfortable with it. At the time, you don't know what to expect until you just do it, until you're there and it's happening. And it wasn't ever hard to get used to. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Backtrack. It was hard to get used to, but it wasn't anything that you could have like prepared yourself better for, I guess, in at least in my experience. So, and the other thing I did to distract myself during that time was I actually started applying for a new job. And that was only because my past job was fully in person. We were expected to kind of be there on site, which was fine, but it wasn't something that I wanted to deal with after recovery because I knew that there was going to be a lot of adjustment period. I knew that there was going to be things that I just wanted to take at my own pace in my own house, like just take my time and not try to add more stress than I needed. So I was looking for a new job that was fully remote and was literally applying to jobs as I was, prepping to get ready for surgery. And it just so happened that one of the jobs reached back out to me and I had an interview. I think it was originally it was scheduled for like a week or so before my surgery, and then it actually got moved up to November 3rd, which was a day before my procedure. So like the prep day and the day that you take all the antibiotics and do like the wipe down and the bowel prep, which is, oh God, I don't even want to think about it. But it was scheduled for that day. And I don't know if I was just loopy at the time, but I was like, oh yeah, like this is important. This job is so important. Like if that's when you guys want to schedule it, like let's just do it then. And of course that day comes around, right? November 3rd comes around, and I've started drinking that terrible like salt water that just is just God, I think we've all been there, but started drinking that, which was terrible. And things started happening because of that. And I realized by like midday, like right before the interview, I was like, there's no way. There is no way that I'm gonna sit through this interview and make it like in one piece. And so I emailed them and I was like, hey, I know this is short notice, but if you don't mind, could we please move this for like, I just said personal reasons. And I had no idea how they were going to react. I really wanted this job. It was the perfect one for me. It was in the field that I studied to be into. They were going to pay me well. It was fully remote, a reputable company. It was like all panning out. And I had to tell them that, hey, like last minute, like literally an hour before the interview, I can't do this for personal reasons. And that's the only details that I gave the recruiter. And within like 10 minutes, I get an email back, and it's like the nicest email. Like, of course, Will, like this is not a problem. This happens. Like, take care of yourself. Like, do whatever you need to do. We'll reschedule for another day. And so, that was obviously such a relief, because I was already so like distressed thinking about the next day in surgery, and I was low on energy. And so it was nice to see that again. Like, if your company or your school or people are like giving you a hard time, maybe it's not the right company, because there's so many good people out there that are like going to support you through this, and they're not going to even ask questions. They're going to like let you do it at your own pace. So be confident, that people will do that, because they're out there, and they understand. Everyone has had some experience in their life, or a family member go through something that is unimaginable, and they project those experiences and allow you to do what you need to do when you need to do them. So anyway, we had rescheduled that, which was a huge load off my back. Now I could just chill out and crap all day long until the next morning. Yeah, so the next morning comes around. I was in rough shape. I'm not going to lie. I don't know if it was just like the emotion side. I mean, it was probably a combination of everything, right? But emotionally, I was out of it. Physically, I was like so cold and low on energy, and the antibiotics were like messing with my stomach for some reason. And I was just like, literally just like, I want to get this done. Like, I want to get there. I'm just so over this right now. And like my mom was like, well, don't forget to do those like surgical wipes before we leave at like 4 a.m. And I was like, God, I know those are going to be just so cold. And I just was like, I don't even want to, like, are they that necessary? But I did them. You should do them. And yeah, so we drove over. Luckily, I only lived like a couple minutes from the hospital. So it wasn't like this big excursion. I didn't have to pick up my whole life. My family didn't have to pick up their whole life. That's something I kind of realize I take for granted, because I know some people travel so far to be able to do these things, and they, family members are staying in hotels, and it's a big deal. And I was fortunate enough to be close to just an extremely great facility with great staff. So I'm really grateful for that. Still am. And showed up at the hospital, and I was called back, and it kind of just, how it is. They're so good about everything that you're just in one room, then the next, and then things are just happening, right? You're getting hooked up here and hooked up there. And yeah, I mean, they just kind of, and I was so out of it too, that I don't even know what they were doing, but it was happening. And I remember after I went under, I guess, like, I don't know, it was just kind of a blur, but I woke up and there I was, and I knew, like, I didn't look yet. I didn't look at like myself. I was just kind of waking up, but like I knew that it was different, and I knew that I had, a scar now, and I knew I had this ostomy, and like just had no idea like what to expect, to the point where I was just kind of like, I don't even want to look, like I don't want to know. Yeah, I guess that was kind of a surreal feeling. It's just kind of like I did it. I'm here. I'm done, and it's permanent, right? Like I can't go back now. They can't go put my colon back in, and I don't want it. So that's where I was at, and I actually remember feeling like pretty good. I don't know if it was just a huge relief or what, but actually the very first day I was up and walking, very little, but I was up and walking after that first surgery, and just remember thinking to myself, like, kind of this overwhelming sense of like, I've got this. Like, I'm walking, I'm like here, I did it. Like, we're past the hardest part was the decision, honestly, to do it, and to like just to commit to the surgery in general, right? Because although my situation was bad, it wasn't an emergency surgery, right? It was scheduled in advance. It was something that at the end of the day, I ultimately had to make that decision to go in and get this done. I mean, I don't know how much longer I had before it was an emergency, but the point is that the hardest part for me in this whole thing wasn't actually waking up from the surgery. It was a month before that, when I called my doctor and said, like, I'm ready to do this. And once it was done, I just kind of felt this sense of like, I want to get back to it now. Like, I want to prove to others, but also myself, that like I went through this, but I'm going to be able to come out on the other side just as strong and just as healthy, if not a lot more healthy than I was. And that kind of set in like right away. There were long nights at the hospital. I was only there for maybe 4 or 5 days the first time around for the very first surgery. I was eager to get home. I felt good. Everything worked well. I was able to eat solid foods pretty quickly after the first one. Like all of my regular, bodily functions kind of came back to life pretty quick. I was mobile every day. I mean, I was like, they used to make comments, like all the nurses in the hallways were like, geez, like you're burning a pathway into the hallways. And like, so, I mean, I was always around and walking around and just trying to stay active and positive. Like it would kill me to like look out the window because I just wanted to like get out and run or not run. I don't like running. Let's get that straight. But just get out and be active and kind of like get back to my life. I was feeling good again. I was, even in the hospital, I was feeling good and it felt good to eat. And, actually, I was pretty impressed with the way the ostomy functions. And it's actually very convenient to the point where I used to tell people, I'm like, if we were all born this way and someone told you that you had to go like be any way else, like you would think that's an inconvenience. I was like, seriously, you don't understand, but I can just go whenever. Like if I have something to do, let me just go do this quick and I'll be back. Like 2 seconds. That's all I need. So, I was pretty excited about it. And, when I got home, I finished up with my other interview at this company. It was like a week. I rescheduled it for like a week and a half after my surgery. So I didn't know if that was cutting it too close, but I just was like, I'll be good by then, right? I'll be
Wait,
home.
I know that you're in the middle of the story here, but you
Yeah.
rescheduled your interview for a week and a half after your surgery.
Yeah,
I
I was
just
like,
need to, okay, I just
it
want
was
to
like,
just need some clarification there. Go ahead, continue, please.
it was like 9 days after, and the whole reason I did that too, right, was like you need goals, like you need to set some goals for yourself. And maybe that one was a little like ambitious, but it was just no different than what we're doing now, right? It was a Zoom
Oh,
call.
it's such a 21-year-old response, though, isn't it? Like, I'm fine. I'm gonna be fine in 9 days after a major surgery removing my colon. Cool. Bless you, Will. Bless you.
But it worked out and I had the interview and it wasn't like I could have done it from the couch. They wouldn't have known any different, right? I mean, it's just my head anyway, but it was good. I had the interview. I was in good spirits. I had good energy and the job actually, it panned out, right? It worked out. They gave me an offer. And so I was kind of not forced to get back to my life right away. Like I certainly didn't need to go back that soon, but I was eager to get back to it. I'd been down and out for so long that like, yeah, I just got out of this big surgery. That's true. And there is a lot of healing that you have to allow yourself to have, right? You need to rest. You need to take everything in moderation, short walks. Like I wasn't going crazy or being unsafe about my recovery. It was just like to have something to distract yourself while you heal isn't always a terrible thing. And honestly, it gave me a lot of satisfaction and just affirmation that my decision was the right one because I was able to work a 9 to 5 and I was able to get through the day and I was able to get a paycheck. And that was like the icing on the cake for me. It was like, you know what? You made the decision, but here you are and you're doing just fine. And so it was probably a little premature to do the interview so soon, but it honestly all kind of worked out nicely. And, luckily I have really great colleagues and supervisors that I kind of just opened up and I told them my situation. I didn't go into like details like this, of course, but I was just like, hey, I did have just a big surgery just recently. If I ever need a little bit of time, like, is that okay to take an afternoon off if I'm, down and out? And they're like, yeah, like that's seriously not a problem at all. Just let us know. And so that was really nice. So I stayed at home for a bit. I recovered, every day I was going for walks. I do have a dog, so I would go with my mom and walk the dog every night. And that was just such it was a weird sensation, like the physical part of the recovery, right? I mean, I had always been someone that was like active and in sports and stuff, yada, yada, yada. And when I got up from surgery, it was like to sit up to get like a sip of water. I was like, wow, like my core doesn't work anymore. Like I have no strength to even sit up to get a sip of water. And when I go for walks with my mom and the dog, it's like my lungs feel like they're still like not able to take in as much air or like they're, pressing on things that they shouldn't be. When I take a deep breath, I get winded so quick from literally taking a walk. And those were just like, I don't know, that was just crazy to me to think that. It kind of like made me realize like, shit, Will, like you did just kind of go through a lot there. That wasn't any small thing. But I had such supportive like friends and family that would, take their time with me or say, hey, like, yeah, let's go for a walk, Will, like, let's catch up, because they knew that that's how I was going to get better and get my body back to where I wanted it to be. But yeah, Thanksgiving came around, which was only a couple weeks after my surgery, and I was eating like a pig, which, you know what, I deserve. So like that was great. And yeah, I mean, I could drink. I could have like a glass of wine with dinner or something like nice, and that didn't like destroy me. I mean, it's kind of like a cheat code, honestly. I mean, you can really put a lot through your body when you have an ostomy, and it just, you don't even think twice about it. So I was like on a bender getting back into that, and that was always great. I love that about the ostomy, and so many good things about that. And yeah, so then I was on the fast track, right, for these surgeries. We planned it out, so I was going to have the 3-part, the initial one, then the reconnection, then the takedown. So my first one was in November. Life was good. It was a good winter. I was downhill skiing. I was ice fishing. I'm a big fisherman, so I was able to do that. Honestly, like I don't really think there was much that I couldn't do. Like I can't think of any activity where I would have been like, no, like I'm not going to do that. Like I felt really good about what I was able to do and my body's ability to do everything in moderation. I don't know. It was a good winter, and I was able to kind of get back to the things I enjoy. And then I had the second, so I had the temporary ileostomy, and then I had my second surgery in April, and that was 6 months later. And that one, like the story on that one was a little bit different. It certainly didn't go as smoothly as my first one, and it was definitely the lowest like morale that I had of the 3 surgeries, right? Because the first one, you feel like crap, that after the surgery you're gonna at least get, somewhat better almost right away. It's kind of crazy how that happens, but I was excited for the first one because I knew I was gonna at least, get back to some form of health. The third one's nice because it's like you kind of get to go back to just living a life with kind of like what you remembered for the last 21 years. But the second one is, it's like this intermediate point where you're not quite at the end goal yet, but you have to go back in and kind of get like sliced open again. And then you have to get used to this, loop ileostomy, which in my opinion was a pain in the ass. And like all this stuff that you kind of just have to like readjust yet again. And you're just getting used to life with this, end ileostomy. You're 6 months in, and now you kind of know you have to go through this stage to get to your end goal, but it's not like a very desirable thing. Like there wasn't much that came out of that second surgery that I was super jazzed about, except for the fact that I was one step closer to the takedown. And but yeah, the surgery, it went well, but I remember there was just like a couple things about that whole hospital stay that honestly were kind of like traumatic for me. I don't know. Like when I woke up, my understanding was that there was going to be like a really small, relatively small, like incision for this one, and it was going to be pretty minimal. And that was something that I cared about, right? Like I don't know, like a big incision was something I wasn't super excited about going into this. And I woke up and I was like, that's pretty big. Like that second one there is pretty significant and stands out quite a bit. And I wasn't super happy about that. And honestly, my hospital stay, like I had a lot of issues with when I started eating soft foods or even some solid foods. When we started integrating that into my diet, the loop ileostomy was not, at least mine was not cooperating with me. I mean, I was kind of getting like blocked up and things just like weren't moving the way they should. And it caused like a lot of pain. I mean, seriously, it was like, felt like my stomach was just going to explode. And I remember there was one night where I told the nurse, I was like, I'm like really hurting. And she's like, well, yeah, you just had this big surgery. And I was like, no, like I know that, but like this is kind of different. Like it's not like I don't quite know how to describe it, because who knows how to describe that kind of pain. Like we haven't like this isn't like a normal pain that you experience, right? Like it's not a normal surgery that people can relate to. Even if you're a nurse and you see it every day, it's like you don't know what it feels like until you do it. So I was trying to explain it, and she just kind of was like, well, we'll just stay on really good schedule with your pain meds or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I guess. Well, I woke up like the next morning after like a terrible night's sleep. I finally got like an hour of sleep, and I woke up and like I was looking around the bed, like I felt like I was like sweating maybe or something, and I looked down and it was just like red, like I mean it was like blood in the bed. Sorry to get graphic, but that's what it was. And I was like freaking out. I was like, oh my god, like I had all this pain last night, like what's going on, like something's the matter. Like my mind was just racing. Like I was like, is this normal? Is this supposed to happen? And I buzzed the nurse, and of course they all come like rushing in, and they're trying to kind of figure it out. And immediately, like within 20 minutes, my surgeon was actually in the room with me, trying to like, I mean, he actually wasn't, he was a super calm guy, as most surgeons are. And he was like, yeah, he's like, this is actually pretty normal. Like it's probably just like a bunch of like tissue and stuff that whatever. And he was like, but like let's address this pain in your stomach. Yeah, like he said that, and I was like, yeah, okay, that's normal. Like thanks for easing my mind. But anyway, he said like let's talk about this pain you were having yesterday all night. And he kind of had to like manually like drain some stuff. And that was like really, it's a weird feeling to have someone like actually, I don't even know how to describe it, but it worked. Whatever he did worked. And it was like immediate relief. But the point is that those kinds of blockages and things like that kept reoccurring for me like over and over. Even when I went home, I got home from the hospital and I thought that was kind of it. And I thought, okay, this is starting to wake up and work as it should, and I won't run into these problems, and I'm going to go back to eating like I did. And even though I took it slow, I actually ended up back in the ER the night that I got discharged in the morning. That night I was back in the ER at about 11 o'clock at night, and it was a super long night. I mean, I was in there and just in so much pain, and like they weren't really sure how to help me, and it was busy in the ER, and so they weren't like readily available to like kind of assist my problem. There was no one there that could, really talk to me and give me the solution that I needed, except for just like some IV pain meds, which didn't do much. And of course, I was just exhausted at this point. I just got home from the hospital, and now I'm back in the ER, which the ER is always a stressful place, right? I mean, hospitals have never been like my favorite place in the world for obvious reasons, because if you're there, there's usually not a great reason behind it. But ERs in particular are just, a lot of people having a lot of pain and issues and uncertainty and not a whole lot of privacy. And I just remember that was not super great. But, eventually all that, the stuff with the blockages kind of corrected itself, one way or another. It took a little bit of time, but eventually I got confident again that I could kind of, eat things slowly and not worry about that stuff. And I could, go to bed and actually get a good night's sleep. And so, slowly but surely I recovered from the second surgery and was pushing to get that third one scheduled, because the loop ileostomy was just not my friend. But compared to the endoileostomy, I mean, it was super active all the time. I mean, it was like, I couldn't believe it. I mean, you eat something and it seemed like 20 minutes later, it was like gone. And that was like super annoying for me. I wasn't a big fan of that. Had never had issues with like my ostomy bag, like staying on me during my first surgery. But after the loop ileostomy, it seemed like a problem that like kept happening. It was just a lot more susceptible for like, I don't know. I mean, for whatever reason, I was having issues where I wasn't even confident like in my appliance anymore. And to change it so much was like totally irritating, like my skin. And it was just kind of like this cycle, like the more you change it, the more your skin's irritated, the more time you spend doing it, the more you think about it, the more you're not happy with it. And like that continued. Needless to say, I mean, I was really pushing. Like I was telling my surgeon, like, oh, I feel great. Like I'm ready to get this third one. Like, let's get it done. Like, how soon can you get me in? And he ended up kind of pulling for me, and we got like a decent date. So we decided on July 5th, went in, and I got that one done. And when I woke up, I felt like $1,000,000. Like it was the best feeling in the world to think that like the worst of it was like done, right? And I made it to this point. Of course, I was like, the first thing I did was like I looked down, I was like, yep, no more bag, which felt good. And I guess, a side note, I never had like an issue with the bag. I did definitely deal with some confidence things, right? I mean, I just was a little, it was weird for me to like walk around with like a t-shirt or shirtless even with this bag on, because I knew that people that didn't understand would be curious, and not in a bad way, but just like in a way that would make me have to kind of rehash these traumatic experiences or try to explain to them that this thing like saved my life, or it makes the conversation just a little bit heavy. And I never wanted that. Actually, my theory kind of going through it, and this wasn't necessarily healthy, but at the time, the way I coped with it was I was just going to kind of not tell people that I was even close with. Like they knew I had a surgery, right? But they didn't know like kind of what it entailed or what it meant. And it wasn't necessarily a good way to cope with it. I learned after the fact that those people would have supported me regardless, right? And it never would have mattered to them, and they would have never asked questions if I didn't want them to ask questions. But it was easier for me at the time to kind of like suppress that stuff. So I was really relieved to get that final surgery and just kind of live my life and not have to worry about answering people's questions that are going to bring back memories of when I wasn't doing so well. And that's kind of how I saw it. But looking back, I wish I never thought twice about it. And I remember one day I'm here in Madison, and so there's like a lot of weird things that go on. It's a great city. But there was a naked bike race that went through like our main square here, the State Street as it's called. And one of my buddies texted me and he's like, hey, not that I was looking at like these naked cyclists or anything, but I happened to notice that like 10 of them or more all had the ostomy bag, like just, riding around doing their thing. He was like, I thought of you. And I was like, hey, like, I know it's goofy, but like, I really appreciate you saying that, because I don't know anybody in Madison that has an ostomy. Like I don't have any friends or connections that I know of personally in this area that have it, even though I know for a fact there's tons of people that do. I've just never encountered someone that I could share that story with. So like, I don't know. I just felt so dumb for kind of suppressing that aspect of my life because it really is a symbol, right? I mean, you could look at it as like a symbol of your journey of, into getting healthy again, however you want to look at it. But there's never a way to spin it that's like negative. And that was definitely something that I dealt with. And I think we all deal with it in our own terms, in our own time, right? So it's not something that's easy to accept right away. It was really hard for me to accept until actually after the fact. Even talking about it now on this podcast was not something I would have ever considered to do, like to talk about this story. And like, it wasn't something that would have happened until I kind of got through it and realized that the whole experience was really quite positive. But I had my takedown and kind of immediately things were working well. It was the weirdest sensation to like use the bathroom. I felt like it was wrong. I was like, I should not be using the bathroom this way. Like this feels weird. I was kind of scared, but everything worked super well. Really grateful for my surgeon. He was fantastic through it and always just kind of answered any questions. And I think really amazing at what he does because it was like really seamless. I mean, I went home the day after. I got discharged the day after my surgery. I didn't like the night that I stayed there. I didn't have a lot of pain. I was up and walking. Going home was just such a relief to know that like I wouldn't necessarily have to go back to the hospital again for another stay. Like there wasn't another surgery to schedule, and hopefully there isn't going forward. Hopefully that's it. And that's where my story ends as far as the hospital is concerned. So there's just a lot of, physically I was still obviously getting used to having like a bullet hole in my stomach, but mentally I was like on cloud nine. I mean, it was great. I just was really ecstatic to be kind of through the whole process. I mean, it had been 9 long months of just relearning how to do things and dealing with health and balancing work and relationships and just staying healthy in general. And that just kind of felt like I was able to finally focus on my current state that I'm going to hopefully be in for a long time. And it's like the final thing that I'll have to adjust to for a while. And I found a lot of peace in that. So yeah, I think things were going really well. And they still actually, they still are. So my takedown was July 5th. Everything, physically is completely healed up. Like I'm really happy to say that I've been like eating super well. Obviously, I've tested it a couple times and there's some things that I wouldn't do again. Butt burn is like a real thing and it's bad. It can be really bad. So everything in moderation, but of course I've tested the limits a couple times. And then I've been able to go to the gym and lift, and my body has tolerated that like super well. And that is just such a great feeling to know that I can go and do the things that I used to do with like very little difference. I mean, it honestly, there's like nothing that I feel like is holding me back from doing exactly what I used to do before I had surgery. So I guess kind of where I'm at. I mean, things are going well with the J pouch now. That's kind of it. So like, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. First of all, I just want to say how eloquently you put asking for what you need, asking the people around you for what you need, asking your employer for what you need, asking your coworkers for what you need, asking your friends for what you need. The way that you talked about that was just lovely. And it is a message that every single person listening to this podcast needs to hear and internalize. It's okay to ask for what you need. So thank you. And then the second thing is, if you need tips for products for butt burn, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
Well, maybe I should
Yes.
just not have like hot wings, like
No.
that's another
You,
situation too.
No. You will have butt burn from all kinds of things, not just hot wings. I'm just letting you know, for someone who hasn't had a colon for 20 plus years, you will get butt burn for other things, and you need to have some options on hand to protect the gentle skin that is your derriere. So
what are the biggest red flags? What should I be avoiding? I'm new to this.
It's different for everybody. It's like people who have allergies. Everyone's allergic to something different. So the way that your body reacts to food, that's why diet works for some people and doesn't work for others to help mitigate symptoms. It's completely different for everyone. And you're doing the right thing. You just have to try. You have to just try foods and see what happens. But I'm a big fan of prepping the area before trying things so that it's not as bad as it could be.
Sure.
Yeah. I know you have questions because you took yourself off mute first, but I had to like jump in there real quick.
No, I love it. First of all, shout out to your employers for being really confident in their relationship with you and confident in you, because that doesn't always happen. So shout out to your employers. It sounds like your doctor had introduced surgery as an option to you kind of in this process of you trying every medication possible for inflammatory bowel disease. What was the tipping point for you? Like, what was it that finally made you go, okay, I'm done?
Yeah. I mean, it was introduced, fairly early on. I feel like it was first brought up in a conversation, maybe sophomore year of college. And at the time I was just like, you know what, like I'm so busy with school. Like I know that there's probably maybe 3 medications that I hadn't done yet. So maybe halfway through the list of, approved medications. And so at that point, I was still confident that there was going to be like a home run somewhere in there, that something was just going to click. But at that point, she knew that like some people just don't respond well to that stuff. And it doesn't matter what medication, it's possible that none of them would work. And I think she was very aware that she was going to help me get through college and help me get through that point in my life. But I don't think that she was super surprised when I came to her and told her that, you know what, I need to get this done. And the tipping point was just the realization that, I kind of looked at my life this time last year. I was looking at my life and I thought, I can't make it through the workday. I'm not going out. I'm not enjoying any time with my friends or family because I have no energy. I'm not even making myself dinner anymore because I get home and I'm so tired that it's not on my mind. Like I'm more concerned with just falling asleep on the couch and becoming like a recluse from everybody. It was just like a realization that where I was heading, like there wasn't going to be some magical rebound. I wasn't going to wake up some morning and just have this go away. I mean, I was still on huge amounts of prednisone and the medication still, like even with taking them, there was just no chance. And when I kind of zoomed out and I looked at my situation, I was like, this is like, what's the point? What am I worried about? Like if I don't get the surgery, I continue to live this shell of a life. And if I do get it, at least I have a shot at getting back to what I would consider, a really good life. And that was it. I mean, when I realized then that I couldn't even go into work anymore, what was I going to do? I didn't have a choice. It was so evident that something had to be done. And then my doctor was ready to help. I think she knew it was coming. She had been pushing for it. And so when I finally said it, she was like, you're going to be so happy. Like, don't worry. Yeah, it's scary, but she's like, you're going to be so happy. And, we had met in person. She's a really great doctor. It's helpful from the technical aspect of things and how the surgery was actually going to go down, but just also as like another human being that's trying to kind of comfort someone that's going through this. I mean, she was just exceptional. And so, her expertise and her suggestions paired up with my situation of just not getting better and just kind of escalating to a point of no return, as you could say, that was the tipping point.
I want to jump in and just say, let everyone know who's listening that once you fail a medication, the chances of you continuing to fail medications increases exponentially as you try new medications. So your doctor already saw that you were on that path, and we are huge proponents of surgery as a treatment option and not a last resort on the show. So I'm going to say I love your doctor, and I don't even know her because she was trying to have that conversation with you, far enough in advance before it got to the last resort. So even if you weren't ready for it, she planted that seed early enough. And as someone who looks at that as a treatment option and not a last resort, I really appreciate that. But I think that everybody should know, and I shouldn't know the percentages off the top of my head because I've probably looked them up enough. She knew where you were going.
She knew. She definitely knew. And the second that I told her I was ready, I mean, she just got the ball rolling like so quick. I mean, she was like, we're gonna get you in like a month from now, which we all know that's tough to do, like kind of out of nowhere. And especially the surgeon that I was working with is a very busy guy. And so she was on my side like the whole time.
Yeah, I really love that she left it in your hands while she could. Obviously, there was going to be a point where I think she was going to say, well, no more. But I like that she was willing to let you make that decision and let you drive that ship, because I think sometimes that's not always the case. There's perhaps more dictatorial doctors out there. Did they have you on any sort of regimen? Because you said you had lost 35 pounds, which is basically what, like a kindergartner? I don't know. I don't know how children operate. So that's like a lot of weight to lose. So did they put you on some sort of regimen to like gain some weight back, do better on the surgery?
Yeah, first off, I guess I'll say I've never like thought about it as like a young kid that was like weight wise on
You're
my
welcome.
body, but now I'm picturing it and it's terrifying.
You'll
Anyway,
never be able to forget this now, Will.
Everyone is welcome.
It's forever.
You're
It's
welcome
burned
for
into my
that.
memory. I not on any like particular like regimen, but I relied just about 100% on the Ensures. The extra protein. I don't remember what they're called anymore. That's like all I drank and ate, and like soft foods and things like that. That was the only thing I could even like remotely tolerate was those Ensures. I mean, it was like I woke up, had an Ensure, lunch, that was an Ensure, dinner, that was an Ensure. I mean, and those aren't really covered through insurance unless you go through like a dietitian. I mean, there might be some loopholes in there, but I never really explored them that much, and they're not cheap. And that was just that was about it. That was all I really had to rely on to get through that. So
no, what's frustrating about that is that they will cover certain types of medical nutrition, but only if you have an actual feeding tube. So they actually make you take that extra step of having a tube inserted, which in conversations with Tiffany Taft and Josie McGarva, it can actually cause additional trauma to people. So, something that the insurance companies could change for sure.
Yeah, I mean those really were like a lifeline because I really couldn't eat anything else, and like they got me through some days. I mean they weren't amazing, but they got me through a lot more than I would have been able to if I didn't have them. So
Yeah, for sure. Can I back us up a little bit though? Because I know one of the things in the write up you sent to us about your story, you did talk a lot about college and how your college experience was a bit different than other people's college experiences. And one of the ones that I wrote down was that you took a final exam in the hospital.
Yeah, actually, I think it was more than one. I must have missed that in my story, but I think it was senior year. I was admitted to the hospital for ulcerative colitis. It was a point where I was just like doing so bad, and the only thing that they, were thinking they could do for me was like some infusion steroids, which are not a good long-term solution. But so there I was. It was December, and yeah, I mean I was literally hooked up to the fluid machine that was giving me fluids and this IV steroids, sitting at like a little corner desk, taking like an online final exam for college. It was like a symbol of my life. There I was dealing with ulcerative colitis in one corner of the thing, and then dealing with like normal college kid things, right there. And I never even told the professor that that's like what was going on. Things were remote anyway because it was COVID times, so everybody was taking the exam remotely on their laptop. But I never did have like a discussion. I think at that point I was just still, I don't even know what it was. I was like too proud to say like, hey, I'm dealing with some health stuff, and I just kind of want to get it done, even though it definitely impacted like, how you study for an exam, how you take an exam, where your mindset is when you're supposed to be focusing on like finance or whatever it was. And instead you're worrying about like your infusion machine beeping at you because it's done with its titration. So yeah, definitely a weird dynamic. And it kind of felt like that scenario is kind of how I felt like my whole college was, where it was always, I was doing college kids things, but on the back of my shoulder, like there was UC just kind of looming over me, like affecting me or impacting me one way or another.
One of the other aspects that I wanted to talk to you about is you mentioned that you're quite outdoorsy and that you like to participate in lots of outdoor activities. That's obviously taking you away from bathrooms. So I am curious how
many times I pooped in the woods.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you have a plan for how this goes, but what did you do to prepare to be out in the woods and away from bathrooms? Because I mean, I, as somebody who doesn't have inflammatory bowel disease, I just don't poop in the woods is how it goes.
If you haven't, you should try it. It's very liberating. But
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, it's just don't be like a public spot. That's all.
I mean, look, I've had to do that too, and I would not classify it as liberating.
I don't know. I just feel like I'm really connected to nature when I do it. I don't know.
No, I would not classify it as liberating.
God, I've got a lot of stories.
Like we need to add this. I can't wait to hear this, Will, because I can't wait to add it to our list of like crazy places that guests have pooped.
Well, I would never travel without like a roll of toilet paper or something. Like if I was out doing something, I always had a backpack with the hand sanitizer and the toilet paper, because if it happens, like, I don't know, it's going to happen, right? So like if we're up north hiking, or God, I probably shouldn't say some of the places that I've done it or I'm going to get arrested, but like sometimes it happens. Sometimes it happens, and you just need to like find a spot. And I mean, for a lot of years, that's how I got through it. And luckily, if I was ever with anybody at the time, like luckily we're able to find the humor in it. Like my buddies were able to find the humor in it. That's a big thing. If you can't find humor in this condition, this isn't the condition for you, because there's plenty of places in this to find humor, and it gets you through the tough times. There was literally a time when I didn't have toilet paper with me, and I had literally just like a white t-shirt on, and I was like there, and I was like, it's either I take off the t-shirt and use that as TP, or I use some like leaf that could be poison ivy. And so it was pretty easy for me to make that decision. So like when I walked home that day, just didn't have a shirt on, and that's how it went. And if anyone had questions for me, like I was just going out for a tan, we'll say that. So that's happened.
In Wisconsin, you were going out for a tan in Wisconsin.
It gets warm here in the summertime. We get like a month or two of decent weather.
So, but there are some places where you do have to pack everything out.
Mm-hmm.
Have you encountered one of these types of parks, or did you just flout the rules and say, screw your packing stuff out?
When you say packing stuff out, I mean, you mean like you just
you can't leave anything in nature that did not start in nature, even if it came from your butthole.
Well, I guess if I have been any place like that, I'm sorry, but it's there.
So. All right, fair. That's fair.
There may have been one instance. We were on a trip in California at a national park, and I mean, there were actually people everywhere. I mean, it was busy. It was a busy spot, and like we were out for a hike, and I remember I had to run. I was like, oh my god, like it's happening, and I need to go. And I went into like some like tall grass because I was like, that's a good spot. Like no one can see me. And like I remember like taking care of what I had to do, and I did. And I got out, and there was like a sign right there that was like, beware of like some poisonous snake. Like don't go into this spot. And I was like, Jesus, like, like why not? Why not? Right? That's perfect. Too bad I didn't encounter that. So
Oh my god.
like the places this
How
brings me.
awful would that have been though? You're like, oh, by the way, I was just pooping in this grass and I got bit by a snake in my butt. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
pretty exposed. Yeah, nothing like squatting down and then looking across from you to a snake looking at you in the eye. That'd be
You just
And
you
then the
just-
A
Yelp
nightmare.
review, 0 stars, do not
Exactly.
recommend.
I feel like just maintain eye contact the whole time and just be like, yeah, you want
It's
some
happening.
of this? It's happening. Oh my God. Listen, Will, unfortunately, our time has come to an end. So we are going to ask you, what is one piece of advice that you would give to our IBD community?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question before today, and I was just like, based on my experience, like, what is something that I wish I guess I would have known sooner? I guess I just want people to like remember that even though a lot of the stuff that we deal with when we go through, and any IBD is physical, right? Like, your body is exhausted, you're using the bathroom a bunch. It feels like a very physical problem, condition, issue, but there's a big portion of this that is how you deal with this mentally and how you treat yourself, how you view your situation. And I think it's just so important to remember that, because if you put yourself in a bad mindset and if you focus on the bad things, if I had always focused on the fact that I have an ostomy bag and I was bothered by that and I just let that completely consume the experience, then I wouldn't be sitting here today talking about it as positively as it actually was. If you can actually focus on the things and force yourself to think about the good that this has done for you and look back to where you were before, right? I think back to where I was this time last year, and it's hard to remember because it's easy to forget when you don't want to think about it, but it's such a mental game to stay positive through this stuff and to be like grateful for where you're at, grateful that we can even have a surgery that does what this does, right? Be grateful for like this community and talking about it and having conversations about it. There's so much that you'll benefit from having a positive mindset. So yeah, I mean, that's my piece of advice.
I'm really glad you brought that up because that is one of the other things that Robin and I kind of harp on, because you're absolutely right. There is definitely that component to this. Even if your disease course has been as simple as possible, like you get diagnosed and you have a medication that works for you and you're Jim Dandy, there still is factors at play there about even, I mean, I'm thinking of some of our guests, like some guilt around not being worse, or, struggles with food and struggles with trying to communicate your needs to your family. Like that, just there's a lot more at play than just the physical aspects of your disease. And I'm so glad that you're fortunate enough to have a really understanding family and friends and employers around you that was less at play for you, but there's still a hurdle that has to be done to get to surgery, to get to the biologics, to understand kind of what it's like to live with these diseases. Well, Will, it was such a pleasure hearing your story and having you on the show. Thank you so much for your candidness and sharing, all of these aspects of your story that I think are super important for people to hear. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everybody else also for joining us for Bowel Moments. So we're going to say cheers.
Cheers.
Hey guys, this is Will. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thank you.